Just a little spoon of your precious love satisfies my soul. Come on, everybody, welcome to Better Than Food. How you doing? Moanin at midnight. The Life and Times of Howlin Wolf by James Segest and Mark Hoffman. So, somewhere along the lines, you've heard, if you appreciate music at all, you've heard the music of, or you've heard a lot of people who were tremendously influenced by Howlin Wolf. I'm out of tune, man. But you've heard people who have gone on to copy the hell out of him. I don't know, people like Captain Beefheart, Tom Waits. There are entire bands that owe their career to one or two Howlin' Wolf songs, or even just like that little, that riff. The Cramps, or the Gun Club, for example. And actually, this is a little, this is a little riff from Jeffrey Lee Pierce. Big Howlin' Wolf fan. A lot of bands are basically one big cover of Howlin' Wolf, and that's a great thing, you know. But I mean, he's responsible for all of the, oh man, so much great rock and roll, you know. I mean, the dark stuff, even stuff like drone metal, or you know, Swans or Earth or Sun, or all these guys, you know, all of that, you know, punk rock, all that shit started with Howlin' Wolf, man. And it's awesome. I love all these bands to death, and they took the genre to a completely different place. But I like to look back and see where that big sound came from. And it turns out it came from the biggest man in blues. The biggest man in blues. Quite literally, I'm telling you, this guy was fucking huge. Like size 16 feet. I mean, I'm a big guy, but I mean, this guy was really, really big. Said shaking hands with Howlin' Wolf was like putting your hand in a baseball mitt. Hands that were big enough to kill a man. And, as it turned out, did. But more on that later. For being such a big guy, he could totally move, though. That was the thing. He was like crazy hips, crazy feet, playing the harmonica with his mouth and his nose at the same time. I mean, a serious fighter in every sense. A real entertainer and a showman. I mean, this guy was, I mean, you just gotta watch some videos on YouTube of him, you'll see. So much energy pent up and exploding out of one guy. This dude is like the musical equivalent of the atom bomb. I mean, there was nobody like Howlin' Wolf. He was at once completely campy and like a total goofball, almost like embarrassingly so, like licking the guitar neck and like rolling his eyes around, crawling on the floor and using whatever he could get his hands on, whether it was a microphone or a spoon as a phallic object, you know. He was not very subtle, okay? All of this in front of the ladies, of course, you know, before Lux Interior from the Cramps was deep-throating the microphone. Howlin' Wolf sold that shit like no other. Or Chester Burnett, as his birth name would be. First off, if you've never heard The Wolf, you should go and listen to Smokestack Lightning, would probably be the biggest hit, I suppose. How Many More Years, Spoonful, Wang Dang Doodle, which is an amazing song. He actually didn't like Wang Dang Doodle. I love that song, but he thought it was too old-timey, apparently. But he still played it, and they made a tremendous hit off of that one. So Chester Burnett was born in the Mississippi Delta, deep, deep in the South, and Charlie Patton, the blues musician Charlie Patton, was the man who was responsible for capturing his attention when he was very young and very, very, very poor. Chester saw Charlie playing in this way that was completely new and throwing his guitar up and being a showman about it and looking really cool. Chester basically hounded him until he sat down for a day and went through 5 packs of cigarettes and taught him a few chords. After a while, he could play for a little bit and he started performing. Howlin Wolf got the name from his grandfather, who would tell him the story of Little Red Riding Hood to scare him after he was caught killing his mom's chickens when he was a young kid. He was a bad kid, apparently. And he'd kill some of his mom's chickens, and then his mother would start to howl, you know, like a wolf to scare him, and the name kind of stuck, the Howlin Wolf. He grew up poor as hell. Howlin Wolf grew up in a time of serious racism all over the country, but particularly in the South. He came up through the worst of it. Wolf came through the worst of it and actually grew up to be one of the wealthiest musicians, not just blues musicians, but musicians at the time. I mean, a joke which was actually true was that his band could collect unemployment if they were fired because he was paying for unemployment insurance. By the end of the road, his system was airtight and sealed. I mean, he was a tremendous businessman, but I'm getting ahead of myself. According to Wolf's guitarist, Hubert Sumlin, who's an amazing guitarist, essentially, Wolf's mother kicked him out when he was, maybe 12 or 13 or something like that, for not working on the farm for 15 cents a day. Just put the picture in your mind. And Wolf traveled around with other family for a little bit. He went and stayed with an uncle who was a violent asshole, and then he ran away from him, and then he went to go and live with his dad. His mother, Howlin Wolf's mother, who was essentially a Christian fanatic, who was a religious zealot, little wacko if you get my drift, was one cold-hearted bitch. And this became a source of lifelong conflict for Wolf because he was, because his own mother rejected him through and through, completely. He would try and reunite with her, or give her money, or support her at various points in his life, and it would just never, ever work. Thus, the music which her son played and which he was made famous for was definitively evil and a product of the devil. And he never got over that one. How could he? How could you ever get over the total and utter rejection from the person who brought you into the world? But that didn't stop him, not by a long shot. Instead, he got totally obsessed, got driven, compelled to do this thing. Whatever was fueling that spirit of Howlin Wolf and the feeling of the blues, it was flammable as hell. The best gasoline around, and he never ran out of it. So he got along with his dad pretty well, and on the 15th of January in 1928, his dad got him a guitar. Again, he started taking lessons from Charlie and playing. Eventually, he went around hanging out with people like Robert Johnson, where Robert would play on a guitar and he would sing in these little juke joints, and Son House as well. Robert Johnson got killed, as we all know, by somebody poisoning his whiskey, probably the husband of a white lady that Robert might have been flirting with, or who knows, maybe somebody just didn't like him, because that was kind of the stuff that happened around at that time. Wolf was very careful where he got his whiskey from after seeing that happen, understandably. Eventually, he really got his own style and began cultivating that distinct, deep, guttural, masculine growl that was soon dropping panties left and right. All kinds of panties. All kinds. Everybody likes to use a metaphor for how it sounds, right? The trick is to create this really elaborate metaphor. It's sort of like a running joke that I've noticed within music critics or, historians. How elaborate can we describe Howlin Wolf's voice? Well, let's see. It sounds like he eats broken glass and washes it down with gasoline. It sounds like his throat was run over 16 times on a hot asphalt road in Georgia and hung up in a smokehouse for 3 weeks. It sounds like it got shot up full of lead and then it got thrown in a swamp where an alligator tore into it. Well, you get the idea. Make up your own. Point is, the dude had a really low, gravelly voice. Probably all the whiskey and cigarettes, but that's just me. Wasn't a huge drinker and would often get pissed off at his band in the later years for being drunk on the job, of course, but he did partake. I think everybody did at that point. And everybody was drinking way too much. Imagine these places where he would play in the early days. Everybody's drunk off of this corn whiskey. And Everybody's completely shit-faced in the deep Mississippi. Places where, I'm not even kidding, they would serve your drinks in tin cups because all of the mugs or anything that was breakable had been used to, you know, beat people over the head with. They were fighting so damn much. Murder, man. Death and murder everywhere. All the damn time. Like, no big deal. They'd gamble and somebody would get shot and they would just keep on going. Sitting on top of the dead man. I'm serious. That's actually a story in the book. Juke joints, man! West Memphis or wherever. Deep in the woods. Could just be a house out in the country, you know, who knows. It was set up wherever you could play. But they were dangerous as hell. In the world that Howlin Wolf came from, life was cheaper than gasoline. Back on the farms in the days of sharecropping, you could get away with murder. People would get killed all the time. And yes, like I was saying, even Howlin Wolf himself once killed a man over a woman. Chopped the top of his head off with a fucking hoe. Ran away and hid in the woods from the police, and then they found him and he spent 2 years in prison. 2. The Killin' Floor Blues, man, for real. So there's all sorts of great stories throughout the book, you know, of course it's like, we have the whole timeline trajectory from, you know, Wolf's birth to his death. It's pretty straightforward, but I mean, there's great moments like when he goes over to London, right? Because he actually gets really, 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 really big, like worldwide. But he goes over to London and he's in his recording session and they bring over Ringo Starr. All these guys are fans of his. And he scares the shit out of Ringo Starr because Ringo Starr is, you know, first off, they're intimidated just going into it because he's Howlin Wolf and he's big and whatever. But they go down there and Ringo Starr, you know, he plays the drums. And he just closes his eyes when he grooves out, you know. And Howlin Wolf just walks over to him while he's playing the drums and he's grooving out. He's got his eyes closed and he just stares at him. And then Ringo opens them and he's like, fuck, you know, so... like, scared the dude. So he's like, no, I'm out. No, forget that. So they bring Eric Clapton in on the guitar, and he says he intimidated the hell out of him, but did not entirely scare away Eric Clapton. And then he did. They said that he was the only guy who could humble Mick Jagger, which he did. I thought that was great. And he was also an acquaintance of a very young James Brown. James Brown opened for him once, and James Brown's doing his song, please, 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 and he's going up to these white women in the audience in the front row, and he's grabbing the fronts of their dresses, and he's shaking them. And after the show, Howlin Wolf is like, man, you better cut that shit out, or we're all gonna get killed. You know, because again, these are days of serious and very violent racism in the South. You had Emmett Till was not that far away. That whole case of that young 14-year-old kid who got slashed up and beaten and murdered and thrown in the, I think it was thrown in the swamp, just for whistling at a white woman at a grocery store. Bad news, man. The slower parts of the book involve dates and, you know, the specific record recordings and all of these sessions and concerts, and it's great for music nerds, and it's presented in a fairly typical way. These guys who wrote it aren't poets, but they don't need to be, you know? They have all the information and they've researched the hell out of this guy's life and made, you know, the parts that are sort of gray and murky very interesting. They've spotted all the intersections between Wolf's life and that of other artists and blues artists, you know, so that history is fascinating to read about. Just seeing the parallels of all these people coming up at the same time and where they came from. You know, people like Charlie Patton or Robert Johnson or all these really early guys, Son House. Then, of course, there's a lot of stuff about Muddy Waters, you know, who was over in Chicago, and Wolf goes over to Chicago, and he's playing around there, and they're interacting, and they know each other. They're stealing people back and forth and all this for their bands. They're stealing people for their bands back and forth, you know. John Lee Hooker makes an appearance. They're all in there, and they all know each other, and it doesn't need to be fancy, and it's not, and it's great, and it's simple. Like the man himself, the story is strong and simple, and it holds up. It's a damn powerful story. A damn powerful story. It's a damn powerful story about a damn powerful man. There was nobody like Howlin Wolf, like Chester Burnett. And if you have even the slightest interest in the dark side of the Delta Blues, or any penchant for the Southern Gothic literary tradition or the music of it, I mean, the man was incredible, you know. He's bigger than a legend. And I just want to read this little piece on his creativity. This is a friend of Wolf's who's talking about the way he could create things, and I really just loved this piece, so I'm going to read it real quick. Everybody can steal another's idea, manufacture it, clone it, or whatever, but it's hard to just create. It's the hardest thing of all. You got to remember, these guys didn't have blueprints. The thing that makes Wolf so magical is that you see a person create a whole genre of music through just their mind, and you ain't supposed to do it. You're supposed to have a sheet of paper, a desk, a quiet room. You're supposed to think and concentrate. And here's a guy using just his ego, creating lyrics in a room full of smoke, alcohol, four-letter words, and intimidating individuals, and yet he still creates, and that's the magic. Howlin Wolf is better than food. He's better than Southern food. He is better than chicken and waffles and biscuits and eggs with sausage gravy. Oh man, I am really hungry. Howlin Wolf actually loved sweet potatoes, and I have sweet potatoes baking like this very moment. I'm a huge sweet potato enthusiast, fanatic. Fried chicken sounds great lately. God, I haven't had good fried chicken in forever. He's better than fried chicken. He's better than all that jazz. And there's nothing better than fried chicken and waffles. That's just me. Always remember what Howlin Wolf said about the blues. Anytime you're thinking about doing evil, you've got the blues. Evil! Alright guys, thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe if you have not already, and always remember life is too short to read bullshit. Talk to you soon. Have a good day. Ciao. Now I'm like 6'3", but this guy was big. I mean, he was like massive, like 300 pounds or something. 300 pounds of joy. I mean, a big man. A big man. A big man. Big man. I mean, it's totally